Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to select people in Photoshop. Selecting people in Photoshop is a core skill that you're going to be using in about 80% of the projects that you do. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you the three primary methods for selecting people in Photoshop. The first is smart selections, the second is hand-drawn selections, and then the third is color or channel selections. So we're going to be doing two projects for each of those categories. If you want to follow along, I have included a link in the description of all the assets that I use. So go ahead, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to File, Open, and this first file here, 01 Kayla, this is just a studio portrait taken against a gray background. Generally, if you're doing composites with images or want to do an image that you know that you're going to composite, you want to take it against a neutral background. So in most scenarios, this is what you're going to be starting with. So let's look at how we can select our person. Now the easiest way is we're going to make a copy, then go to our properties, and if we scroll down to the properties, you're going to see this select subject button. So if we click on that, you'll see we have our person here selected. Now let's go ahead and drop this to selection with Command D. Just want to show you a couple other ways that you can access this select subject. So first you can go up to select and go down to subject. That'll select your subject. Also, let's go Command D again to deselect. If we select any of our selection tools here, you're going to see this select and mask pop up. That is a workspace specifically for making selections. So let's click on that, and then here you can see we have our select subject. If I click on that, I've selected my subject. Now let's go out of this because I want to show you a few other ways. So if you go to your smart selection tools, you're going to see that you have select subject up here as well. So I can click on that, that'll select the subject. And then finally, I'm going to do Command D again. We have this object selection tool. Now with the object selection tool, you can see this thing spinning. That means it is looking for the objects in our scene. Once it stops spinning, that means it has made its selections. And here you can see this is what it plans on selecting. Now if you have more than one object in your scene, you can click on this. That'll keep the blue overlays turned on. So if we click on this, we have selected our subject. So those are all various ways of achieving the same thing, which is selecting your subject. Now for our purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to select subject, and then once I have my subject selected, I'm going to go into select and mask. Now if you don't see the button up here, you can also go to up here and go to select and mask. So here you can make adjustments to your selection. So you'll see that this is a workspace that's separate from the normal Photoshop workspace. You have a set of tools here that are specific to making selections, and then you have properties here where you can make adjustments to your selection. Now first thing is up here you have view mode. So this allows you to change the viewing mode of how Photoshop is depicting the selection. The two that I use the most are overlay, and the shortcut for that is V, and then black and white, which is basically just a representation of your mask, and K is the shortcut for that. Okay, so those are our two viewing modes. Here is some options. This will show the edge. This will show the original background. This will show real-time refinement, meaning as you're making changes, it's going to update your mask. And then here you have your high quality preview versus low quality. Next, you have the opacity, and this is for your mask. So if you're making selections and your mask is getting in the way of showing you your background, you can adjust that. Obviously this image just has a gray background, so there's not much it's achieving. Although if you look at the hairs here, and we can just zoom in real quick, If I have this at 100%, I can't tell whether I've cut out or missed any hairs in my cutout. So that's the advantage of the opacity. You can also change the color of your overlay, and this is very helpful if, let's say I was cutting this out. I wouldn't particularly want blue because then I can't tell if I've missed any of this shirt which has that same blue in it. So this allows you to just pick a color. You can make sure it's a color that works for the image that you're selecting. Okay, next you have some presets here, and these presets just load the settings for these. Honestly, I've never used this. And then you also have remember settings. This just means the next time you select and mask, it'll preload the settings from the last time you used it. Okay, next you have refine mode, and this is object aware or color aware. I usually just stick with whatever Photoshop decided to use for that image, because it will pick color aware or object aware based on the image that you've chosen. Now, in some cases, I have found that switching these two has helped me, but those are pretty rare. This just allows you to switch what kind of model of AI you're using, whether it's looking for objects, which works really well with people, or whether you're using color, which works if your background and your subject have very distinct color differences. Okay, next you have edge detection, and I'm going to show you this in the mask view mode, which is K. This basically, from the point that from your edge, it's going to look both this way, and look for differences in contrast or in color to determine that edge. So let's see what happens as I turn this up. You can see it's digging into both the white part of the image and the black part of the image, kind of hunting for contrast and then using that contrast to dictate the mask itself. So I'm going to turn this down. You can see that that's obviously not helping us, although it is making this hair cut out pretty nice. But I'm going to show you how you can do edge detection on specific areas rather than across your whole edge. So let's put that back to 0. Smart radius, this basically, if you turn it on, in theory, it's going to be hunting for that edge. So as you can see here with the smart radius turned on, even when I turn this up quite a bit, it's kind of restraining it more closely to my edge. So in this case, having smart radius turned on for this specific selection would work well. Okay, so that's what edge detection does. Okay, next we have global refinement. And again, I'm going to use just this K view, meaning this black and white view of the mask, just to show you what these do. So smooth, let's go into a little bit closer here. You can see kind of the roughness of this edge. If I turn up the smoothing, you can see what that's doing. It's basically doing like a median blur all along the edge there and just smoothing out all the roughness. Okay, next we have feather, and that's obviously just feathering your edge. In most scenarios, you don't want to add any feathering. Next, you have contrast. So let's look at this edge here. You can see we have a little bit of gray there. If I turn up the contrast, it's just gonna crunch that so that everything is either pure white or pure black. Okay, and then shift edge. This allows you to shift the edge into your image or away from your image. So that's what those do. Generally, I leave all these pretty defaulted, the global refinements. So we're going to just collapse that, and you can also collapse and uncollapse any of these as you're working. And then finally, we have the output settings. So decontaminate colors. If you're doing something like, let's say you shot this on a green screen and there's green fringe on your edges, you would use this decontaminate colors, and you can determine how much it's going to decontaminate the colors. Now, because this was shot with a gray background, we don't have contaminated colors, so as I adjust this, you can see it's really making no difference to this image. Okay, and then finally we have our output. So this will allow you to output it to a selection, meaning when you hit OK, it's just going to load this selection into your Photoshop selection. Next, you have a layer mask, or a new layer with a layer mask, or a new document with a layer mask. In most cases, you're either going to use selection, layer mask, or new layer with layer mask. Those are kind of your options. Obviously, if you do selection, you're just one step away from doing any of these others if you want to. So generally, I just leave this on selection. So that's all your settings on the properties panel here. I want to show you what these tools do as well. The first one is basically your quick selection tool. This allows you to add or subtract from your selection. So in this case, if I wanted to take the hat out of the selection, I would go to the minus or hold down Option, which is going to temporarily switch to the minus brush, and then I could paint this out of the selection. Okay, and then to add to the selection, obviously you're just going to paint with the same brush over the object that you want to add into the selection. And there you go. Okay, next we have the Refine Edge brush tool. So this basically works the same way as edge detection, but rather than doing it from your existing edge selection, it's going to do it over the area that you brush. So if I take my brush, I'm going to make it a bit smaller, and I brush in this area, it's going to look in this area for visual contrast or color contrast, and based on that, it's going to refine our mask. So if I hit K again, you can see what it's done. Now the problem is behind this hat and in this shoulder area, it should be 100% white, meaning we should be selecting it entirely. So to fix that, I'm going to go back onto my quick selection tool and just kind of select in the hat area here. You can see that solved it down there. Maybe do the same in the shoulder area here. And same here. So there you go. Let's hit V again. And there you can see we have a butter cutout of the hair using that edge selection tool. Now this edge selection tool is primarily designed for hair and for fur, but you can also use it in other spots if it missed some part of the selection. Here you can see we have a part that should be in the selection, so I'm going to go to my quick mask here and just paint over this area. Okay, next we have the brush tool. So this works the same as painting directly on your mask in Photoshop. Basically it just works like a normal brush. You can adjust the size of the brush with Control and Option, left and right, and then to adjust the hardness up and down just like you can in Photoshop. And if you hold down Option, you're going to paint black on the mask, and if you don't hold down Option, you're going to paint white on the mask. So this allows you to do kind of fine-tune manual adjustments to your selection in the Select and Mask workspace by just brushing. So here you can see, and I'm going to just turn the opacity down here. You can kind of see that this finger should be in our selection. So if I just paint across the finger there, I've now added that to our selection. And maybe my brush is a little too faded or feathered, so we'll just make the hardness about 90% and paint over that edge, just like that. You can also see there's some missing here, so this we could just use our brush and paint out that area. Okay, next we have the object selection tool. Now we already have our subject selected and there's only one in this image, so this isn't very valuable here, but this would basically allow you to select multiple subjects if you have more than one in your image. All right, next we have the lasso tool, and this allows you to select areas. So if, for example, I wanted to take this dress out, I could go option to make this minus from my selection and then start drawing in this area the part that I want out of my selection like this. Now I'm going to undo that because obviously I want that in my selection. The one thing you do have to be aware of with this lasso is that there is no feathering and there also is no anti-aliasing. So you just have to be aware of that. Make sure if you're going to use the lasso tool, you have to use it in conjunction with your edge detection here. So for example, if I go here and I wanted to make this edge, I would go, let's see here, like that, and then maybe go along that same edge here. If I hit K on the keyboard, you can see that I've gotten rid of any grays in this area, because the way this works is there are no grays, not even in the transition. It's just pure black and white with this tool. So just be aware of that. Okay, so that's what the lasso tool, the hand is the hand, and the magnifying glass is the magnifying glass. And obviously the shortcuts for these two work just the same as the rest of Photoshop. So if you're on any other tool, you hit the spacebar, you'll get the hand. Spacebar and command will get the magnifying glass. I don't know why it's beeping at me, but apparently it does not like me holding those keys down. Okay, so there you go. That is the Select and Mask workspace, and this is the tool that you're going to be using 90% of the time when you're selecting a person. So you'll select subject, and then you'll go in here and make some adjustments. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and adjust this. First thing I want to do is just clean up the hair. So I'm going to go to my edge detection and just brush over this area where the hair is. I'm going to try to not go into the hat or into her shoulder here. And I know that if I hit K, you can see I did a little bit. So I'm just going to go to my white brush tool here, make it a bit bigger, and just paint in this hat and where this shoulder is. I'll go V on that. Also just turn this down a little bit more. So something like that looks good. And then let's do the same on this side. We'll use the edge detection, just brush over the hair section there. And then I can toggle K, paint in this part of the hat here, paint in the shoulder. And then also you can see we have a little bit of white in our blacks there. So I'll just paint that out too. Good. And then I'm going to hit V again. So we need this in our selection. So I'm going to use my quick select tool and just paint this back in. And then we have our little hand here. So let's go and zoom into this area. Go onto my normal brush tool, make my brush really small here, and just paint in, holding option, that part of the mask. And then we'll also paint in the additional part of the finger here. And I'm happy with that. So here I want to make sure the output is on selection, and then I'm going to hit OK. And then from here I can add a mask if I want, or do whatever else I want with this selection that I've now made of her. So that is the Select and Mask workspace, and also the basics of selecting a person in Photoshop. But let's take a look at another scenario where maybe we don't have such a clean gray background as we did in this image. So let's go ahead and close this. I'm going to go to File, Open, and I want to open this O2 Brook file. Here you can see she's making a pose, and I'm on my Object Select, and you can actually see what Photoshop is going to select. You can see it's having some trouble in this area here and also differentiating her hair there. But also the bigger challenge that we're going to have with this image is that she goes out of focus here in the bottom of the image. So we're going to have to deal with that. I'm going to show you some tricks with select and mask to do that. So let's go ahead and select subject first, and then let's go straight into select and mask. Here I want to get a different background color. Just want something that kind of stands out a little more, and it looks like this kind of purple color. It's giving me a nice contrast there. So let's use that. And what I want to do here is I actually want to go hit K to go into my black and white view. And for my edge detection, I want you to look at what happens here when I turn this way up. You can see that our bottom here, where we have soft focus in our original image, it's actually picking up some of that soft focus in our selection, which is what I want. So let's go back to K and let's just adjust this. Let's also try maybe turning on the smart radius, see if that helps us. You can see that is helping us here up on the hands. Okay, so let's go back to V, and you can see here we kind of miss, this is missing from our selection. So I'm going to go here with my quick selection, and let's just hold down Option and paint this area out. You can see it did a really good job. It's just missed some of this, so we can go with a really soft brush here. I'm going to make it even softer because this is out of focus. Just kind of paint in the part that it missed here, something like that. Okay, and then I'm also just going to use my edge brush here, kind of run it along her hairline here where the hair meets the background. Just see if we can get any better hair selection with this. And if we hit K, we can see how that's looking. So pretty good job. We do have these things that we're going to have to clean up, but a lot of these things I feel it's going to be easier to clean up in Photoshop rather than in the select and mask workspace. So I'm happy with this. I'm going to hit OK, and then here I'm going to create a mask, and then let's option click on the mask and start cleaning this up. So if I add a solid color layer underneath here, just make this blue and put it underneath, we can kind of see the issues that our mask is having. I'm going to select my mask. You can see the little white outline around the mask. That means my mask is selected. And then I'm going to go B for my brush. Make sure I'm just on a soft round brush here. And then with white as my foreground color down here, I'm going to start painting into the mask. And basically here we're just kind of cleaning up the mask itself. Okay, so now if we go back to the mask view, meaning option click on the mask, you can see some of these parts that are darker. Now trying to paint around this without affecting this, it's going to be a bit rough, but what we can do here is we can put our brush on overlay, and then with a black brush we can just kind of paint over this area, and because it's overlay, any part that's white in the image will not be affected. So you can see as I'm painting around here, I don't have to be too worried about painting the finger because it's not going to turn black when I paint over it because my brush is on overlay. So something like this. And then I can switch my brush to white, and again, because I'm on overlay, it's going to make the light parts lighter, but it's not going to make the blacks lighter. So something like this, switch back to black, do this part here. And then let's switch this back to normal. Just clean up those sections there, there, and there. Go back to overlay. And There you have it. So we now have her selected from the background, and we also have the soft focus built into our selection. So if we put a new background behind her, it'll look like she belongs in that background. Okay, so that's the select and mask method. That's the method that you're going to use with most images. The next thing I want to show you is what to do when select and mask does not work. So let's look at this image. Now this image is kind of a weird case where, you know, the AI is really going to have trouble identifying the person in this shot just because the way it was shot doesn't, you know, it's hard to identify what part, like where her eyes are, etc. Like all the kind of indicators that AI would look for in a person are kind of missing in this image. So if we go on to our quick selection tool here, or object select, and hit select subject, you can see that Photoshop is having a really hard time figuring out what the subject of this photo is. So what we're going to do is, instead of using the AI selection tools, I'm instead going to hand paint the selection. Now I could do that with a brush, so I could just add a mask here, and then with a black brush I could start painting out all the parts that I don't want in the selection. And that would be basically kind of the hard way to do this, is just paint this out. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer mask. I could also do the same thing with a lasso. So I could start going around here and try to make a hand selection with the lasso. Now the problem with that is I'm using a mouse, and even if you're using a pen, trying to keep your hand completely steady while doing this is going to be really rough. So, you know, even if you're really good with your mouse or really good with your pen, the reality is your hand, just the hand shaking a little bit, is going to make for a bad selection. So what other options do we have here? Well, my favorite option, and kind of my go-to for any manual selection, is the pen tool. Now with the pen tool, what I can do is I can use a vector line here and draw a selection all the way around here. So I want to make sure I'm on path, not shape, so that I'm not actually creating any new layers. I'm just making a path that we'll then use to turn into a selection. And here I'm going to just start at the top, make one click, that'll start my path, and then I'm going to, when I click on my next anchor point here, I'm going to drag it out, and that's going to create this nice curve on my line. And I'm going to do that all around her, and because I'm using a path here, I can add nice curves to my lines. I can also, if I do mess up, I can just hold down Command, go back here, move one of these around, and then pick up where I left off. And the trick with when you're doing any kind of path like this is you want to try to make the whole thing line up exactly with your image with as few anchor points as possible. So the less anchor points you have, the better off you are. And we're just going to go around the whole image. I'm going to kind of fast forward through this just because you don't need to watch me doing all of it. It will get boring pretty quick. But just realize the longer you take on making your selection perfect, the nicer your final product's going to be. Now when I'm doing a manual selection around hair, I'm going to go around all the part of the hair that doesn't peek through to the background. So here it's peeking through to the background, but here it's all pure hair. So I'm going to select around the part where it's not at all peeking through any of the background. That's just a good general rule too. That way, if you can't refine it any further, you still have a nice selection of the part of the hair that is full. Okay, so now that I have my shape or my path done, I go on to my black arrow tool or path select tool, select both of my paths, and then right mouse click and say make selection. I'm going to have anti-alias turned on. I'm going to make my feathered radius 0.5 pixels and hit OK. And then from here, I can go into my select and mask. So I'm going to go here, go into select and mask, and then from here, I can just use my refine edge just for this hair here. So we're going to do just along where the hairline is, like so. And then hit OK. I'm going to add the mask and then option click on the mask and just clean up this right here. So I'm going to go onto my brush tool with a white brush, just kind of paint out where there shouldn't be gray in the hair here. And then paint with black the part that should not have any gray in here. So something like this. But just that refine edge at least gave me some hair detail in my selection. And it's going to have to do what we want here. So something like this. And there you go. We now have her cut out. And for this, I primarily used the pen tool just because the AI selection tools were having a really hard time finding her. And then we just used the select and mask to refine the hair. So let's go ahead and close this. Next one we're going to go to is the 04. And this is kind of another good use case scenario for the pen tool. Here, if I go to select and mask, so let me go ahead and do select subject, and let's go to select and mask. And I'm going to turn this way up, maybe change the color here to something like a green. So here you can see it didn't do a good job with the hat, and also kind of around the jacket, it's done a rather shoddy job. Even if I turn on the edge detection, it's not doing any better finding that edge. So for something like this, where the kind of frazzled edge or not clean edge is just this hat and her hair, and everything else is a relatively clean edge, what I might do is just use kind of a combination of both tools. So I'm going to cancel out of this. The first thing I'll do is a vector path around the whole thing. So let's go back to my pen tool. And if for something like this where you're having kind of trouble defining or seeing the edge, what you can do is just add a curves layer at the top, bring up the bottom and the middle, and just use this. You can kind of turn it on and off as you work on your path. So here now I can see this better. With my pen tool, I'll just start making this path here, and kind of already covered in the last thing the basics of the pen tool. I'll show you a few other things here. One is if you make a path like this or a line like this, what you can do is hold down Option and then click on this handle, and then you can change the direction that the path is curving toward. So that's helpful if you come to a corner, just go like this, and you can redirect that to where you want that to go, just like this again. Do that again. And then obviously if you single click when you're making the anchor point, it's not going to add any curve to that line. All right, I'll fast forward through the rest of this. All right, there you go. We've made our selection. Let's go ahead and throw away our curves layer now. I'm going to right mouse click and hit make selection. And then we'll go into our select and mask workspace. And in this case, I might just want to feather my selection a tiny bit. So maybe 2 pixels. And let's hit OK. Actually, let's hit V, and let's see what happens if we do some edge detection just around where her hair is. And I'm going to take the hardness to 100 and just paint right up to there. So not bad. It's giving us just a little bit of hair detail there. I think that's going to be better than not having any, so we'll leave it at that. And then with a soft brush, I'll just kind of paint away this extras there, something like that. This is just enough for a tiny bit of our background to peek through there. Okay, and let's hit OK. All right, let's go ahead and add the mask. And you're going to see here the one problem I have is that this edge should be more feathered because this actual edge is a little more feathered. And what I can do here is I can actually select the part that is out of focus, which is this part here. So I'm going to make a feathered selection. So I'm going to feather my lasso by 50, select this area, and if we hit Q, you can see my selection's feathered. And with my mask selected, I'm just going to go to Blur, Gaussian Blur, and that's going to Gaussian blur just this part of our selection that's out of focus. So let's do probably something around 6 pixels. And that looks a little more realistic. And let's go ahead and add a solid color. And you can see we now have her nicely selected from the background. And that's a combination of both the pen tool and select and mask, which is usually what you're going to do. Even when you make a pen-based selection, you'll probably end up making some corrections in select and mask, and also some corrections just painting directly into your mask. Okay. So that is the crux of drawing a selection. The next thing I want to show you is making channel-based selections. And for that, let's first open this O5 file. So let's see if we can select her out of the background without using any of the smart tools. So first thing I'm going to do is just make a copy of her, and we're going to call this mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this layer into a black and white mask that we're then going to apply to our background. So first, let's go to our channels and just look at our various channels. So if I click on RGB and then start clicking on my individual channels, it's going to give me a preview of those channels. And because the hair is going to be the hardest thing to separate from our background, what I'm looking for here is which of these channels has the best separation between the foreground and the background. And you'll notice that my blue actually has pretty good separation between background and foreground. The green is the worst, right? So the color of the hair is very similar to, or not the color, but like the tone or the luminosity of the hair is very similar to the background. Now red probably has the best separation, with the background being dark and the hair being quite light. So I think I'm going to use the red channel information. So let's go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And I'm going to take the red, pump it all the way up. And you can see right away that that's made her hair very white against the very dark background. So now I'm going to start playing with the other colors. And what I'm trying to do here is I want to make the background as black as possible and make her as white as possible. So pushing the yellow to darks is doing the opposite of what I want. So I'm going to push those a little bit toward white. Green, not having much effect. I'll leave that one alone. Okay, cyan is making my background darker. So I might just push that a little bit darker. You can see if I do it too much, I start to get this weird noise. So I want to avoid getting that. Okay, next, also the blue is making my background darker. It is also making my jacket darker, but I think for the jacket, that's a pretty easy pen selection to make. So I'm just gonna not worry about the jacket for now. Okay, so that's probably as good as we're gonna get it. Let's hit OK. Next thing I'm gonna do is make a copy of this, Command J, and then do Command M to bring up my curve. And here I'm going to try even more to kind of separate the black of the background and the white of her hair. So something like that I think is good. Okay, next let's go ahead, turn both of those off, and I'm going to make a pen selection of her jacket. Now you can see that the entire jacket edge is out of focus because the only part of the jacket that's in focus is her shoulder here. So if I go on my pen tool and I start just kind of making this selection around where her jacket is, I'm also going to go ahead and select her face, because I know that no matter what I end up doing with the hair selection, I'm always going to want her face to be 100% in my selection. So it's going to help me to just have that as a pure white selected part. We'll just do something like this, and then back down to here. Okay, so we now have that selected. I'm going to go right mouse click and say make selection. And then here what I want to do is I want to hit Q after I've made my selection. That's going to bring me into a quick mask. And here you can see the problem. We have a feathered selection, but our mask is not feathered at all. But because this is a quick mask, I can go to Gaussian blur. And you can see there, I can make this blur match the out of focusness of my background, and it looks like something around 12 pixels looks good. Let's hit OK, and then let's hit Q again. And here, if I go onto my mask copy, I'm going to fill this part with white. So let's go make sure D to default my colors, make sure my foreground is white, and then I'm going to do Option Delete to fill that part of the mask with white. Okay, next we're going to start painting in the part of her hair. So here I'm just going to use a soft white brush and just kind of paint in. Right now it's on overlay, so I might just do that as I get kind of closer to the edges. Keep it on overlay, go all around those edges, and then put it on normal and just kind of paint in, making sure I don't paint outside of the hairline. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now what we're going to do is take this and turn it into a mask. And to do that, I'm going to go to my channels, hold down Command, click on the RGB channel, turn this off, and then with my background layer selected, just hit on the mask. And there you can see we've cut her out of the background, and we did it without using any of the smart tools in Photoshop. Now the advantage of not using the smart tools in Photoshop, or knowing how to make a selection without the smart tools, is if you ever run into a photo like this where the smart tools aren't working, you know that you have the skills to select it without the smart tools. So this is one scenario, and in this case we started with her being quite a bit lighter than her background. I want to show you one other case of this, and that's when we're going to start with an image where our subject is darker than our background. So in this case we have a nice distinction between her hair and the background, but here you can see we're going to have trouble with that. Also, her face is in focus, but the bottom part of her body is not. So first, I'm just going to make a pen selection of her. So let's go ahead and do that. And again, I could use the select subject for this, but I want to show you how to make or how to select a person without using any of the smart tools in Photoshop for these last two. So here we go. I'm going to select all the way around her. Okay, so we now have our selection. Let's go ahead and make selection there, hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of my background. And here I'm just going to fill this in with black. Actually, I'm going to make a new layer and fill that in with black. And then on my background layer, I'm going to go to black and white here. And I want to turn the yellow pretty light so we get the color out of our background. Obviously, if you go too light, you start to lose some of this hair information. So we kind of have to like go where it's not too light. Something like this. And we're going to use some curves in our background to kind of curve it. But I think that looks pretty good. So let's hit OK there. Next thing I want to do is do Command M, kind of just work on my contrast. Again, in this scenario, rather than her being white and the background black, I'm trying to make her black and the background white. So any mask is just black and white information. So if you can make your subject white and your background black, or vice versa, through information in the image, well, you can then turn that into a mask. Something like this. And then here I'm also going to do the overlay trick. So I'm going to take my brush, put it on overlay. If overlay is a little too harsh, you can also try it with soft light. And here, painting with white, I'm going to try to get my background to be white without losing my hair detail in my mask. So something like this. And then we can use black to try to get a little more of that hair detail in there. So something like this. Okay. And then here, when I turn this on, you can kind of see that this edge and this edge are too sharp. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take the part that's out of focus, because this is its own layer and my marquee here is already feathered. I can go here and kind of just do a Gaussian blur on this part of the edge. So something like this. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to take these two layers and just smash them together. So if we select both of them and then do Command E, and we can call this mask. Let's clean it up just a little bit further here. Take my black brush, put it on normal, and just paint out a few things here. So like this, and then up here as well. Highlights in her hair there. Okay, and then again, if we do Command, click on RGB, and because this is inverted, when I make the mask on here, I'm going to hold down Option and that'll invert it. And there you can see we've made a really nice selection of her. And again, we did not use any of the smart tools in Photoshop. We simply used information that existed in the color information of the file along with the pen tool. So there you have it. That's how you select people in Photoshop. And hopefully in the course of this, you've learned some tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects. Now, after you've cut out a person in Photoshop, there's all manner of things you can do, including compositing them into an image, retouching, and so forth. And if you want to learn more about that, you can dive into Nucly.com, where I have a whole bunch of Photoshop training and tools. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, leave a comment. I do try to read them all. You can share this video, turn on notifications, and otherwise, here are some other tutorials you can check out. And I will see you next time.